Przed Państwem Karina Hollekim, mentor and co-founder w firmie Young Happy Minds w wystąpieniu Dare to Dream.
This one. So this, what you just saw now, this was me. But you can all relax. I'm not here to make you base jumpers. But I have some experiences that I would like to share with you. And the thing is that not everyone can identify themselves with base jumpers. But the drive within us that makes us follow our heart and maintain the kid in us, I believe that that exists in us all. And I have lived a bit of an unusual life. But my story is universal. Because it's about finding your passion in life. It's about overcoming adversity and embracing change. And it's about choosing the life you want to live. And then never give up pursuing it. One time in elementary school, we were asked to talk about our dreams. And I came back to class and I explained how I dreamt about flying, like the birds. I thought that the birds, they must be the happiest creatures in the world. And I admired their capability of playing in the air and to be so free. I wanted to feel that same kind of freedom. So I wanted to learn how to fly. My teacher told me that it was a nice dream, but I needed to learn how to be more realistic in life. Because people can't fly. But I never left that childhood dream. And against at least my teacher's better knowledge, I did learn how to fly. I started base jumping. Base jumping has an alarmingly high mortality rate. So, in order to justify our actions, we used gallows humor frequently. So whenever we were scared or nervous about the possible outcome, we would ask ourselves, what can possibly go wrong? Humor was our way of dealing with extreme stress. And it worked. So I lived in a dream world as a professional base jumper and a skier. I was sponsored by some of the biggest names in the industry. My days, they were filled with film shoots and photo shoots. We had private helicopters and airplanes in my backyard. And I was walking the red carpet and had champagne at my own movie premieres. I was living the dream. Take a look at this. It was time for World Cup in paragliding. It was a huge show, and I was invited there to jump and to entertain. And I remember we sat inside the plane, looking out of the little window as we rose just slowly up towards the sky. And we flew low in between those grassy hills and the snowy mountaintops. And this was in Switzerland. Switzerland has a really beautiful landscape. And I was thinking that, I must be the luckiest girl ever who gets to experience all of this. And the atmosphere inside the plane was nothing to be worried about, nothing to be nervous about. We had done this hundreds of times before. We were going to fly our suits. We were going to entertain. But most importantly, we were just going to have fun. And we jumped out of the airplane. And I had a camera that was attached to my helmet so I could film the others in the air. And we flew side by side, making S-turns over and under each other. And the smoke that we had attached to our leg, it just followed our every move and created a beautiful pattern in the sky. And when it was time to release the parachute and just land safely on that grassy field in front of the spectators, I could hear the clapping. I could hear the shouts from the thousands of spectators underneath me. And I just let out a scream of pure happiness. Woo! And then I realized something had gone wrong. At the top of my career, my dream shattered. In 10 seconds, I went from heaven to hell. My chute was spinning uncontrollably towards the ground. I had a tension knot that tangled my lines. And my first thought was, I'll fix it. But soon, the rotation speed was over 100 kilometers per hour, and there was nothing that I could do. I have lost friends in exactly this way. And I understood that I would die the same way. And it felt stupid. I mean, I had done so many dangerous things in my life. And now I was going to die like this in a routine skydive from a plane? I didn't see my life flashing before my eyes like you hear about. I mean, dying didn't scare me. I just didn't want to die. I loved my life. The only thoughts that went through my mind those last couple of seconds before I had to hit the ground were, fix the problem. You have to fix the problem. Come on, you can do this. And then, brace for impact. I hit the ground, and it all turned black. I was lucky to hit a huge rock when I impacted the ground. It crushed everything that I had from my hips and down. I had 4 fractures in my left femur, I had 2 broken knees, and I had 21 open fractures in my right side. But that rock, it saved my back, and it saved my head, and most importantly, I was still alive. But I woke up to the hospital 2 days later, and the doctor that stood by my bed that day, he didn't exactly fill my room with sunshine, although he emphasized how lucky I had been. He rambled on about infections in my body, and then he finished off with his conclusion. You are severely injured. You'll never walk again. I was so shocked. I couldn't speak. I could feel My throat was thickening, and I could feel tears were watering my eyes, but I couldn't say a word. I couldn't cry. I didn't even ask him a single question. And then he turned around and he walked away. And the sound of that door slamming, it echoed in my room, and it felt like he shut the door to my life. And I cried every day for a week. I had no powers. I was afraid of the future, and I could see no light at the end of that tunnel. And thoughts and unanswered questions, they were just flickering through my mind. I mean, this was my job. What was I going to do for a living? But maybe more importantly, this was my identity. This was who I was. Was I ever going to be able to get a family of my own? I was frustrated, I was sad, and I was chained to that wheelchair on indefinite time. What do you do then? I forgot this picture. I spent 4 months in that hospital. I went through 20 surgeries, and the doctors, they removed 12 centimeters of my femur because it had rotted due to that infection and the bacteria. And in order for the infection not to spread to the rest of the body, because if it did, it would be over and out, they decided to amputate my leg. But somehow they decided to make one last attempt. And when I woke up after that last surgery, I was met by a smiling doctor. I mean, I had spent 4 months in the hospital. I had never seen a smiling doctor. He told me that they had found a piece of grass, a piece of gravel inside my leg. And that was the reason for the ongoing infection. Now that they had removed the grass and gravel, it was finally over. From that day, I decided to eliminate all negative energy. I realized that my time here is limited. I realized that one day, it may be too late. I had spent so many hours, I mean, even living a dream life, I'd spent so many hours not feeling good enough. Always striving for what was next, instead of appreciating here and now. I understood that if I wanted to do something with my life, it would have to be right now. The only problem was that right now I weighed about 42 kilos. And I looked more like a sparrow than a fighter. But fortunately, it's not your kilos that decides whether you are a fighter. My goal was not to relearn how to walk. I needed something bigger. I needed something that would trigger my emotions, that would make me want to get up in the morning. My goal was to make it back to my mountains and my powder skiing again. And I pushed limits ever since I was a little girl. I left my job as a computer programmer in order to pursue my dream. And I was the first girl in the world to perform a ski base. Now I had to take this and transform it to my hospital bed and use it from there. It wasn't easy. It was never easy before, and maybe even more difficult now. But like we used to say back when we were base jumpers, what can possibly go wrong? But the truth is, I had never felt more helpless. I had never felt more vulnerable. Because what I needed, first and foremost, was to learn the most basic skill. a skill that even a 2-year-old masters. I needed to learn how to walk. And it's ironic because I had spent all my life trying to be special, trying to be someone different. And now, all I wanted was to be normal. And at this point, I didn't have the strength to make any big changes in my life. But I understood that the power of the little changes and how they can make a difference in the long run. It didn't have to be much, just little things, like getting up in the morning when the alarm clock goes off instead of hitting that snooze button. Because if I do, it'll give me time to have that breakfast. And if I do have that breakfast, the chances of me making it to the gym and even stay 10 minutes at the training center is so much more than nothing. Putting away my phone, being present with my friends, or even shutting down my laptop at night and rest. Little things. But the sum of those little changes, when those weeks, they turned into months that eventually turned into years, those little changes, they started to make a difference. At the rehab center, I had a mirror inside my room. And every day, I stopped in front of that mirror and I gave myself a little cool nod. And I told myself, you're tough and you're strong. And when all of you quit, I'm going to last another 10 minutes. And then I gave myself one of those little tough nods, and I kept on rolling out into the hallway. The truth about that story is there was nothing, I mean nothing, about this girl that was either tough or strong. I looked more like a sparrow, remember, than a fighter. And I knew it. I knew it. But I know some strong girls. I know some tough girls, and I know what they would have done, even if I wasn't one of them. And so by telling myself this every day, every time I passed that mirror, little by little, I started doing what strong girls would have done. And little by little, my body started listening to the words that I told it. And I know that was part of making me that strong girl in the end. My accident changed my life. That's a fact. But how I choose to handle the consequences of that accident, that's what's going to determine my future. That's what decides my future. Because I can choose to make this accident an excuse for why it's okay to fail. Or I can use it as an opportunity to create something new, something bigger. Some time ago, I stood on a high mountaintop in Norway. It took me 6 months to learn how to put my socks on again. It took me 3 years to relearn how to walk. And it was 5 years of training with uncertainty and fear of failure that made me come back to my mountains and my powder skiing again. And making it back, that's what made me a complete person again. Take a look at this.
And I'm told you to be patient, and I'm told you to be fine, and I'm told you to be
I have seen this clip 100 times, maybe 1,000 times, and it still makes me a little jiggerish just to watch it. But I want to say that I have been given a gift. Because I've been given the gift of seeing, looking into the future, and come back to live my life differently. How would you change if this happened to you? I chose my life. And even if I would have had to spend the rest of my life in that wheelchair, I wouldn't have regretted. And it sure helps, but it's not necessary to crash into the ground to take actions in your life. I think it helps just to remind ourselves every once in a while that our time here is limited. So we better start making it count. Because at the end of the day, what really scares me is the fear of failure. But the only failure that I can make is if I never try. So I like to bring out that little base jumper in me and ask myself, what can possibly go wrong? So choose your life. Never stop pursuing your dream or your passion. Make those little changes every day towards a better you. Take the risk and just go for it. Because if I were to teach you or to tell you one thing that I try to teach my 2 little boys back home every day, it's that you have one life. Live it. Thank you.